Welcome to Pivoting to Technology Adoption. I'm your host, Donna P. Mitchell, the Transformation Authority. Every week, I sit down with executives, strategists, and innovators to tackle the one problem no one's solving: why 70% of technology transformations fail. Let's pivot. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Pivoting to Technology Adoption. And today I'm excited to have Will Leach. And I'm going to tell you why. I'm just going to cut to the chase. I haven't had anybody on this show since we started talking about pivoting to technology adoption. Nobody in the behavioral space, in the behavioral science space. But my guest today, Will Leach, who's the founder and CEO of Mindstate Group, a behavioral science firm in Dallas and one of the world's leading experts on subconscious decision making. Before founding Mindstate, Will led behavioral research at PepsiCo's Frito-Lay Smart Lab and served as vice president of behavioral labs at System One Research. His work has shaped behavioral strategy at PepsiCo, Mars, New York Life, and Amazon. He's the author and the bestseller of Marketing to Mind States, teaches behavioral design at the Cox School of Business at Southern Methodist University, and is a U.S. Army veteran. I'd like to welcome him to Pivoting to Technology Adoption. Say hello to your audience and ours, and tell us a little bit more about your background. And really, I want to know, how did you choose behavioral science? Because I found it most intriguing, and I had nobody on the show to talk to us about that. So can you give us a little bit more information?
I sure can. Hey, Donna, thank you very much for having me on your show. I appreciate it. Yeah, it was a path that many other people, you kind of fall into a bit. I was in U.S. military, and when I got out of the military, I went and got a degree in economics from the University of Florida, and then I went to applied econometrics to do a degree in applied econometrics at Texas A&M University. And I just did a traditional market research path. I worked at big companies, Frito-Lay, energy companies, biotechnologies, just doing classic market research. But where behavioral sciences entered into my life was back in around 2009. PepsiCo started investing really heavily in understanding how people make shopping decisions, or how they
Mm.
make purchase decisions. And we opened up a laboratory called the Smart Lab, which was in Addison, Texas, where I got to run a series of experiments using neuroscience and behavioral psychology and anthropology, and truly understanding why people make the decisions they make. And through that work, we started to understand different methodologies and different models to understand the real whys behind decision making. So I fell in love with that sciences, eventually left the corporate world to start my own company. And I work with companies all over the world looking at, first, how do people make decisions? And then how do we apply those into marketing, innovation strategy, et cetera?
Well, I want to know, the most important thing is, how do people really make decisions? Because I'm curious to know what really happens, and it may not be in this first answer. What really happens that people end up resisting all the time first? Um, Not only resisting, but why there's such a disconnect in the workplace. And then maybe from an external standpoint, there may be something different that drives that decision. Or is there something that's the same? And because of the environment and whatever's going on, people change their attitudes or their behavior. Can you give us some insight on that? Because I find this all very interesting. It's going to tell us why we're losing so much money.
I can. So the first thing, we got to get into people's heads. If you're an executive out there, people do not make rational decisions, they make emotional decisions.
Hmm.
So, in any kind of marketing, sales, technology transformation, you must understand that we are people first, then employees. So there is, and not only that, right, Donna, is that we make, just put your perspective, data tells us we make about 35,000 decisions every single day, like
Wow.
35,000 decisions. The vast majority of those decisions are made at the non-conscious level. They have to be, because you couldn't possibly do cost benefit analysis on every one of the
Hmm.
decisions you're making every day. So if you understand that your employees are first human beings, I know that sounds funny because we take that for granted, but human beings have emotions and they're thinking outside of just what you want them to do. I want you to buy this. I want you to take your initiative and sign up for this app or whatever, you must realize that they're emotional decisions. So if you don't understand the emotional components of your employees' decision making, you're always going to be at a disadvantage. I think that's the number one thing that I find people don't do right. They give a series of steps, and here's what we need for you to do, but they don't start with the person first and then try to understand what the person needs for them to make that change.
So when they make the changes or they decide to make a better decision, I guess, what are the steps? What happens on the behavioral side? I think that's a good place to start before we start talking about the adoption and technology and transformation, if we get into that at all. I think it's important for us, myself, and even others listening. What is it that we need to consider and remember besides the emotion? How did you come into this framework? Are there different steps? Are there different arenas, different motivations?
There are. So there's 4 steps in understanding why people do what they do. And this is for anything. How do I get my kid to eat its vegetables, to how do we make a decision to buy a home? All decisions go through this process. The first thing is that we have goals. So it's something called goal theory. We want to understand that people have goals, and they come into 3 different parts. Functional goals, those things that you and I could talk about any day, Donna. Oh, I want something to taste good. I want it to be valuable. I want it to be low price. I want it to open easy. Whatever those things, those are called functional goals, really important things. But then what you do is you say, well, why do you want those things, those goals that you have? That's where we get into something called emotional goals. And that's how we want to feel. And then once I figure out how people want to feel, the next thing you want to do is understand what are their aspirational goals. Who do they want to become? So those all are under the umbrella of goals. Here's why that's important. Because all actions, every action you have is towards a goal, whether you know it or not. So outside of a reflex action, I burn my hand, that's kind of not a goal, but every other decision you make is towards a goal. So if you want somebody to change behavior, you have to understand what their functional goals are, the things that they can easily say, how they want to feel, and who they want to become. Because if I can talk about those things specifically, I can grab people's attention. And more importantly, in today's world, I can maintain their attention. So that's the first part of understanding how to get somebody to take an action. Secondly, do you want me to go on the second one, or you want to talk
Go
about
ahead with
goals?
the second one. Yeah, I'll
Okay.
wait on this question. Go
Okay.
ahead.
So the second one is motivation. So all because we have goals doesn't mean that we take action on the goals. We just
Uh-huh.
know that we have goals. What you need to take action is what's called a motivation. So it's our desires. There are 9 core human motivations that drive the vast majority of human behavior. Things like safety, like we have a desire to feel safe and secure, or achievement. We all have a desire for success or power. There's belonging, our desire to feel affiliated. So either way, there are 9 of these motivations. What those motivations do is they get people to get excited about changing behavior. So that's the second part of the model. Third part of the model is we have to lower resistance to change. And I think this gets involved with a lot of technology adoption. Though you can know what I want to do and you can motivate me to do it, I still have psychological resistance. That's something called regulatory fit. Really, what that means is that we are either seeking to gain more good things in our life or we're seeking to minimize bad things in our life. If I understand that my customers want more good, or if they want more bad, I can reframe, I can position this idea in a different way. So the idea is if I knew, Donna, that you wanted more success in this podcast, I could talk about things like, well, if you choose my brand or if you choose my book or whatever, we can help you get more listeners, blah, blah, blah. Or you may be more cautious and you may say, well, I don't want to alienate a possible listener. Now I can take my same product and I can say, well, if you go with my product, you go with me and my book, I can make sure that you don't lose a customer. It's the same product. It's the same idea, but you can frame it up and position things differently to make it feel more natural and intuitive. And so remember, out of those 35,000 decisions you make, the number one decision you make is to not decide. You do it every day, all the time, because we have so many decisions and sometimes just a little bit of resistance that doesn't feel right, what you're asking me to do, we will say, you know what, I'll get to that later. And you never get to it. And then the last one are just biases. We have these biases, they call them heuristics in psychology, that we use to make decisions fast and easy. So the classic one is a social proof that if we know that a lot of people are taking on a decision, or a lot of people are listening to your podcast, I'm more likely to go, well, if a lot of people listen to the podcast, I will too, because a lot of people are doing it. It makes my decision faster and easier. So we all have these non-conscious biases. And if I can identify a bias that somebody has, I can now use that in my messaging. If I understand those four different things, I'm much more able or better able to get people to focus on the behavior change, get excited about the behavioral change, lower resistance to that behavioral change, and help them make a fast, easy decision. That's why we understand those four factors.
Okay, so you said a lot there. So I'm going to bring it down to a couple of questions. The first one's going to be, so you have all this resistance, and then you have AI.
Mhm.
And folks know or feel that AI is going to take my job. You want me to learn something that's going to take my job. And there's not a lot of security there. So I guess my question is, based on the 9 core motivations, you mentioned a few to us,
Yep.
how does the messaging from the CEO or upper level management need to be modified in order to get the action that they want from the organization at the various levels? Because I'm thinking, just on my own experiences, you can't talk to frontline the same way you're going to talk to the people in the CEO. And middle management, they in the middle of everything and they got pressures coming all different ways. So how do we apply this? I feel like this is a fit. That's why I wanted you on the show. I feel like this is the missing piece because I don't know this piece, you know.
Okay.
I know it in a way like you do as the expert. Because when I've had my major projects, I had to think about so many different things. I had people in different departments telling me what's really going on so I could really understand how to move next. And there's so much to this that you need to understand because you really said the most important thing. These are people. At the end of the day, the technology, everything is fine on the technology. It's the people side that we're really not addressing appropriately. So, how does the messaging change to get the behavior that they need to see in the organization? What should C suite be thinking about?
Yep. So the first thing I would recommend you do is truly understand one of those 9 motivations, or which of those 9 motivations drive different groups inside the organization. And actually, Donna, if you were doing it the right way, you would know, every manager of a person would know their motivation of each individual employee. Now, I know that's a lot to ask. I've been in corporations, you've been in corporations
But we
too.
did back in the day. All them reservations that we knew them. We knew them folks. We watched. I learned how to observe behavior. We knew them. You're saying the right thing.
That's
You're
right.
right.
That's right. And I think sometimes with AI, we're starting to remove ourselves from humans, unfortunately. But let's say, for instance, if you did work in your organization, if you're a CEO of a company and you said, you know what really brings people into my company and what really gets them excited, I'm just going to make it up. It's belonging. So there's a motivation called belonging. And belonging is our desire to feel aligned and accepted and connected with others. So let's say you're for a nonprofit or an NGO or just really just a company that employees wanted to be there because they think we're going to change the world. They want to be a part of something that's bigger than
Mm-hmm.
themselves. So if you knew that about your customer, sorry, your employees, if you knew that about your employees, the way you would talk about AI or any change management system would be focused on how will this allow us as an organization to be a part of something and to build something that's bigger than ourselves or to be affiliated. You can take almost anything and talk about it in a way, almost anything in a way that would bring people together. So I'm really bad with examples, but I'll do my best. So let's just say that CEO wants to bring in artificial intelligence into customer care. Let's just say that, into customer care. And they're saying, hey, this new technology is going to make you more efficient, and it's going to make you faster at your job, and it's going to make you be able to get your job, get 3 times the productivity. In none of those things did I ever talk about how AI is going to help bring us together. So that messaging is going to fall flat. You're talking about benefits to you as a company, but what does that mean to me as a person who wants to feel like I'm connected with people in my organization, with this person next to me in the cube next to me? How does that AI help me do that? That is your job as a CEO, is to figure out how AI will help them do that. And even if that's not its core capability, but what if you said, you know what, this AI tool that we're rolling out, is going to make you 3 times more productive so that we can now take some of your time and really work with others to make sure that we're making better connections between us as our company and to our customers. Just using that kind of connection would say, oh, I see now AI helps the company, but also me because I feel like I want to belong to something. That's how you have to think about things if you're a CEO.
Okay, so you walked right into it. Talked about this before the beginning of the podcast. We started thinking about it and talking about it a little bit, internal and external customers. And in my old world, I had to always be concerned about the external customers. Sometimes they were still in that vertical, or sometimes they might have been cross sector. How does that still help in that communication? Because you mentioned customers, and you've done some work, I know, with PepsiCo and Frito-Lay, where you really start talking about the external piece. How does that work, and how does that communication stay the same or be different?
Yeah, I have a belief that for most people that are working at a company, that they at some point understand and appreciate the value of their customers, not even just from a financial perspective. Frankly, if we don't have customers, I don't have a job. That's easy, no doubt about it. But what you want to try to do with any organization to create a strong culture is talk about how you and your company help others outside of your company. Like it's just a natural thing we want to do. We want to be able to look in the mirror and feel like we have a strong self-image, right? And that we're contributing to not just the benefit of myself and my job, but also to make people's lives better. So I think that's always an important thing for organizations to do. Not saying they always do that in terms of communicating to their employees, but you should do it because you shouldn't just want to keep your employees happy financially. You need to keep them happy by, do I feel like as an employee, I'm bettering the lives of others? That's a great kind of company to work with. Mm-hmm. So taking that into account, when you have the same idea that your customers have these same 4 factors, they have goals, they have motivations, they approach their buying decisions either cautiously or optimistically. They have these biases that we say. What you want to try to do is identify how your employees, maybe they're driven by belonging, right? But maybe your customers are driven by, there's another motivation called empowerment, our desire to feel in greater control of our lives. So now what you have to do as an organization is say, okay, so how can we as an organization that we're building connections internally to help, we want to be able to bring these connections and our products and our services together to help customers gain greater control over their lives. Mm-hmm. That's kind of how you bring the outsider's perspective in. And then it kind of links those two things. So you have a nice vision of this is how we're working internally to bring that control over to our customers.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, that makes a lot of sense. So how do you help the mindset with even your colleagues, or you're in C-suite and everyone's mindset isn't where it needs to be? Does it still come back into those 9 motivations? Does everything come back into that framework?
It comes into the framework, but I would say the first thing you got to start off with people's goals. And this is where I think managers sometimes, it's hard for them because we don't have great management training, I think, in many companies. And frankly, there's big companies that do it really well, and there's small companies that do it really well, and then other big companies don't do it well, and vice versa. So I think as a manager, whether you are a manager, a director, a vice president, C-suite, understanding the goals that your employees have for their career is really, really important. And so, of course, if you ask them, you have conversations in your one-on-ones, and especially on your first getting to know each other, asking about, what are you looking for out of career here at Pepsi? Say, well, I want to get promoted quickly. I want to make an impact on the organization. I want to have flexibility in my schedule. All those things are great. You should know all that stuff. But again, then later, well, how would it make you feel if you get these things? And you wouldn't say it exactly like that, right, Donna? But you'd want to get to know your employees well enough to say, okay, here's how they want to feel. And we just gave the example of belonging. I know that Becky really feels like in her last job, she was isolated. She was at her house by herself. She never felt a part of a team. So that's a big part of what she wants to feel. So I now know that she wants to feel affiliated. And then so why? So what does that do? If I can make you feel like you're a part of a team that's really connected, not just at a business level, but personally, who will that allow you to become? And what if she said, that will allow me to feel like I am a member of something that is, as we said, something bigger than myself. I can make an impact on my teams, become a manager on my customers that I couldn't otherwise do myself. If you just knew that about your employee, the way you think about projects, the way you think about how you incentivize your employees would change. I'll give you an example. I am introverted a bit. I don't make friends very easily. I'm kind of like the guys on the corner. And I remember I was at Frito-Lay and I won this award. And my boss, with every good intentions, brought me up on stage in front of about 140 people to
Hmm.
recognize me. And if she just knew that I was so nervous when she didn't give me the heads up. She thought it'd be fun to make it a surprise. And I was going up, I was sweating, I was so nervous because I think she's gonna make me say a speech or whatever. If she just understood that really my personality was not to be brought up on stage, I would have much rather her just brought me aside, tell me how proud she was of me, and I would have been so excited by that because I just wanted to feel like I was respected by my boss. It's called the Esteem motivation. So just having these small conversations and knowing these small details can when I was on stage, I felt like she didn't know me at all. I was like, why would she have brought me on stage? She knows it, but she didn't know that about me. And so it's those types of things. If you know your employees at every level of the organization, then you can actually bring those mind states I was talking to increase their desire to keep working for you. So those are small little things you can do every day.
So, with that said, so you have the CEO and they have their divisions, and there's still a disconnect. There's still a big disconnect. How and why does that happen? Did they just totally miss it? Are there other dynamics that need to be with that? Sometime more use more than one, motivation. I'm just kind of curious on how there's such big disconnects, and there's concerns by those that are in leadership that really have to make this work on this line item and get the adoption moving, and the organization is just not there. What do they do? And probably if you could share what might be missing or they need to consider.
Yep. The first thing that came to mind was that messaging is not the same thing as meaning. And I think when we bring in
Mm.
consultants to do change management, we often think about how can we communicate this in a very clear and simple way so that everybody in the organization gets it. That is a message. That does not create meaning to get employees to take action. So you're being very clear and you're being very simple, but that doesn't mean that they're going to do anything differently. So I think that we talk about marketing, and when you're a company out there, there's a big part of your job is to market your products so people will buy. Well, marketing is no different externally than it is internally, right, Donna? Like
It's true.
you're talking to human beings who have feelings, they have identities, they are moms, they are business professionals, they have sports, they have these complex lives. But yet we think that our job is we have to be very clear with our messaging. Here's what the organization needs you to do. And you may have an incentive program on top of that. But if you're not giving meaning to people, they will resist. Remember, we talked about that psychological resistance. And Donna, they won't even know they're resisting it. I don't think many actively go, I don't believe in this change. I'm going to subvert that change. I don't think that's what happens at all. Here's what happens. That email that you thought from that consultant was so simple and clear. That email was from the very top of the organization. We're going to put out this big email that's going to talk about this new change. And we have all these different training programs.
Mm-hmm.
And that gets lost in the other 200 emails that your employees got because it never popped off the screen, even if it came from the CEO. Why? Because you sent a message to people that rather than trying to create meaning and what's the purpose of this idea and how is that going to help me reach my goals as an employee. So I think there's a big disconnect there in that we think our job is to be very clear in our communications and messaging, but what we really need to do is create meaning for our employees. And if you create meaning for your employees, that next email that comes out, they'll look at that email, they'll read the entire email, they will seek understanding from their boss if they don't understand it. But in a world of 35,000 decisions, you may choose just to read that email later. And Donna, that email gets buried, it gets deleted, and you never see it again. And that's why change management takes so long sometimes. You keep throwing the same ideas out again and again. Stop talking about the message and find where you're going to create connection and meaning with your employees.
So can you give us some insight in the PepsiCo, Frito-Lay? What was happening there that lab came into play? And it was successful, obviously. But can you share with us where they were and where they ended up once they put the smart lab in play?
Yeah, it was such a great couple of years when I was running the organization. So beforehand, before we brought in behavioral sciences, we were very traditional in market research. We would send out surveys to people, asking them what do they think about a product, what do they like about a product, what they dislike, and we were really good at that. I mean, you know how it is. These are massive corporations that spend millions of dollars interviewing people to try to learn how they make decisions. But here's what happens. So let's say, Donna, this is a very normal stat. If I do a survey and I ask you, how likely are you to buy this new flavor of Cheetos? Let's just call it Flamin' Hot Cheetos. You may get on a survey, 90% of people say they're likely to buy. It's like, oh gosh, that sounds great.
Yeah,
And we're going to go market that. And all of a sudden we find out only 15% happened. Like only 15% bought. But wait a minute, we had people, 90% of people said they were going to do something, but only 15% actually did. We call that the say-do gap. There's lots of people that say things that they don't do. It's not because they're lying. It's because we are very bad human beings. Humans are really bad at being able to predict our future behaviors. I can tell you why. We all do it. We have all done. We're kids. We're going to start investing in our 401k just as soon as I get that next promotion, right? And so we know people go and they don't invest in their 401k, or I'm going to lose weight. I know I should lose weight, but they're eating cheeseburgers on Friday nights and things like that, right? So we're very bad predictors of our behavior. So what happened is we started hiring people. It's like, why is there such a big gap? Why is it that our surveys say one thing, but our in-store results, our sales say another? So there were no technologies that understood that. There was no data that told us why that was. But where it was in academia. So there are these sociologists, psychologists, anthropologists, all these social sciences that generally don't talk to businesses. They live in academia and they work as counselors. People come out of these academic careers, they work as counselors and they work in teaching fields, not in business. So we had somebody come in from Kraft Foods who came in and said, I'm looking at the research and it's all broken. So he came from a social science. He came from, I think, psychology. And he said, all of these surveys asking people what they say, what they're going to do, people can't predict what they're going to do. It's a year from now. They have budgets. Who knows? So really what happened was they came in and they started hiring neuroscientists, social scientists. We had our own cultural anthropologists on staff. We built out a $20 million laboratory in Dallas, Texas to do nothing but help us understand how people really make these decisions. So we brought in brand new people with skills, brought me in to manage it. So it was really a concerted effort to say what we're doing currently is not working. We're going to go into a totally different field, which in that case was the social sciences.
So with that said, you've brought in the social sciences. You've got the different motivations. We're kind of in the same space in a different way. I think at the end of the day, I'm curious from your perspective, why are all the companies for so long making the same mistake over and over and over again? If you had to really say the top 5 things or the top 3 things, what is going on? But I started really paying attention. Okay, because I retired for a minute. It came back out. I'm like, this is not rocket science. We didn't even have all these methodologies back in the day. So how are you losing not just millions of dollars? I would have never got down the block if I started losing that kind of money. But how you not losing millions, but you losing billions? Can you shed some light on that? It's really not funny. This is a scary time. It doesn't make any sense. And everybody's still going right along.
I know. I'll tell you, I think that there is this idea, this self-image theory.
Yeah, what's the behavior behind that question?
Yeah. So, I like to think like this. So we all think of ourselves, let's say if you're a CEO.
Yeah.
And you got brought in, your last CEO got let go, maybe they retired early. I'm doing the air quotes there. And you're brought in to make a change, right? This change is we got to be more profitable, go into a new thing, but you're going to make a really big change. For you to be a CEO and you're wielding millions of dollars, first off is that you see yourself as the hero, self-image. You see yourself as an image. So, and when we see ourselves as the hero, and actually we're conditioned to do this, right? Imagine from the very first day you were born, you looked out in your eyes until the very last day you're on this earth. The whole world is coming through your lens. You're the center of attention. You may not think that way, but you're the center of attention because everything you look at, it's always looking back at you, if you will.
It's
So
all about you.
it
Okay.
is about you. And then we're babies and everything else. So if you're a CEO, you have such a high, and you can be the most compassionate, you can be the most empathetic leader possible, but the world revolves around you, especially if you're a CEO. So I think the first thing is that CEOs and people, executives feel like they are heroes. And what do you do when you feel like a hero, Donna? Everyone else, they must have done something wrong. I mean, you can try to learn from it, but they're not like me. I'm the hero. They brought me into this organization to make this big change. So I think what happens is we don't learn that there's only one hero. It's your customer, it's your employee. That's really the hero. And if you start thinking of yourself as I am a tool belt, like I think of Batman versus utility belt. Remember we grew up on Batman and Robin. So Batman is the hero. But the utility belt is very important for that hero to be their best self. If we thought of ourselves as CEOs as saying, I'm not the hero, my employees are my utility belt. What if we said, my employees are the heroes of this organization? I am the utility belt. I need to give them the resources they need to change the behavior that we're looking so we can accomplish our goal of changing the organization. So I think the first thing is we have this hero focus, and what that does is it forces us to think that we have all the solutions ourselves and not that our employees have these solutions. So that was the first thing that came to mind. And then secondly, I think what we do is we don't pressure test our assumptions when we're making big changes. What if you did like a friction audit? I thought about this. Like, what if you said, okay, I need to get this new technology adopted in my organization? What if you said, if you looked at it and said, okay, what could make this go wrong? What are all the areas where there will be friction that our employees may not adopt this? So it's very employee focused. And I think if you were to do kind of a friction audit and you said, I want to pressure test all my assumptions. My first assumption is they're going to read my email. But what if they won't read my email? What happens then? If you pressure tested all of your assumptions as a CEO or as an executive team, you may find really big outages that things have to be true for your change to come through. And it may be something as simple as, are you aligning the incentive structure of your employees? People are going to do this work with your tech adoption. And if those aren't aligned, then of course they're going to have resistance. And again, it's at subconscious level, Donna. They're not actively probably resisting change and they're going to delete these emails, though some do. But it's more like, I'll get to that later. Oh, I'll go to that training tomorrow. When I'm reading the training, I'll go to my phone and I'll just kind of listen in a little bit, but I'll multitask. It's because they're not engaged. And so you're not going to get great training, from your phone or whatever, if they're not fully engaged.
So before we close, what about the fear levels? How do you close the gap on the fear? That's kind of resistance in a different way.
It is. That's a really hard one because fear is one of those nine motivations. It's one of the most powerful. And so that's a very, very hard question that if I believe that this new initiative is going to impact my job or it's going to impact my friends or it's going to make me move to another group or whatever, then if I feel that I'm not safe, then I will actively resist sometimes, right? Because we will fight for things that we fear, right? We'll fight those things that we fear. I wish I had a great answer to this. I can tell you that the first thing you need to do as an organization is maybe in that friction audit is to assume that there is a significant portion of your employees that are going to be fearful. Now, how that comes to life is something called status quo bias. We prefer things that we've done again and again, the status quo habits. We prefer those things because they're safe. I love what you said there because I think you're right. There's this status of like, is it safe for me to take on that? First, if you understand that that is going to probably be one of your very early signs of non-adoption of your initiative is like you're going to have fear. You need to help alleviate that fear. And that could be something as simple as we have talked to many people in the organization. We understand that there are some concerns that you may be feeling about this, but what we want to do is talk to you about those concerns and answer any questions you have and also show you how this new technology, this new idea that we're going to bring through the organization, you don't need to be fearful of it. And even with that, Donna, there's still people that say, yeah, that's just corporate talk. But if you really listen to your employees and, of course, roll it out in such a way that that technology is in fact helping them, it's not going to take their jobs, or it's going to help get them to a different position that will be a better position for them in the long run anyways. I think you have to kind of go head first in that, really go tackle that problem, because you're right. I think the fears of, I don't know what this thing is, I just know that it could impact me, and I'm not in a position in my life right now that I need to be impacted. I feel very happy. I'm safe. I feel status quo is working really well. It will derail adoption, certainly in the short run.
So we got a few more minutes. So I got another question.
Okay.
So we're kind of moving from, I've done some mission-driven work, nonprofit, and the technology adoption. Then you got your regular organizations, your Fortune 500, your medium, and then you got healthcare. And in healthcare, you got a lot of compliance, you have a lot of regulatory. You've got physicians that really don't want to deal with this. I'm fine. You're going to take my job. They're not going to need me no more. They're going to do diagnostics, and that can do it better than I can. We saw this. We heard that. And how do you bring this mindset model and these 9 core motivations into healthcare? I think there's a place for it in my healthcare work. So I'm asking for those listening, and I'm asking because those interactions, I'm a little surprised that I have some organizations that really want to rock and roll, and they starting to bring in the AI here and there, but I'm still not seeing the mindset and the thinking of what do you really need in the organization? What's your goal in the organization? Some of them are just trying to get the AI because everybody else is getting AI.
Oh,
So,
I know.
and we got to do it, and we got to do this because we're going to get left behind. So, what would you say, or how could you, for those that are listening in the healthcare space, is there anything that you could share that would be helpful? I'm sure there is something. That's not a good question. I know there's a lot you can share to be helpful. How should we frame this for healthcare? That's the
Yep.
question, or for a healthcare system.
Yep. So I do quite a bit of healthcare research, especially in the pharmaceutical side right now. Behavioral sciences is really taking off because the status quo isn't doing very well for organizations. So I will tell you first off that the things that we're talking about today, many health organizations, in fact, that's probably the highest growth sector right now is in healthcare with behavioral sciences. And it's not just internal; it's also external. Like we now need to message differently to our patients because they're being inundated with advertising for new prescriptions and different hospitals, so much competition. So that's happening. Here's what I would tell you. And even when I work with healthcare organizations, they oftentimes will tell me, yeah, but Will, doctors are so rational and physicians and especially surgeons are so rational. And so when you talk to them, they don't like all that emotional stuff. And I always got to remember they are still human beings.
They're still people.
They are still people. They still have their goals for themselves, for their lives, like for their practice. They still have those goals. They're still motivated by their desire for. Now, what's interesting is sometimes it's their own core motivation for sure. Like I want to be a successful oncologist, right? That's of course they want that. But also what's interesting is that they bring a lot of their self-identity on helping their patients because they're seeing patients every day, especially nurse practitioners. Donna, nurse practitioners go so far. They're almost willing to, I don't care about what motivates me. I just want to make sure my patient is okay. So they're so patient focused. But let's just talk about a doctor. They
Well,
Go ahead.
all the healthcare. I don't mind both because I deal
Yeah.
with both.
Yeah. So I think they're still human. And I think what you have to do is say, you know what? Doctors are in this when they're thinking about themselves, they're driven by their success and maybe esteem. They went to school for 9 years and they've been in practice for 20 years. And so they have a desire to feel like that they have high esteem. They worked really hard for their practice. But then they also are focused on their customers, which are patients, and what motivates them. And a lot of times we'll see nurturance motivation. And where doctors will say, I want to be successful, but I need to take care of my patients. The nurturance motivation, our desire to provide love, care, and appreciation for others. So the thing I would tell you is make sure that you realize that internally they have their own goals, their own motivations, but also you need to map back what they want, what they desire for their patients. Oftentimes in healthcare, it's going to be, I need to protect my patients, like you just said, safety. I want to take care of my patients, which is nurturance. And then the third one, which will sometimes come up, is help provide, give my patients greater control over their lives, especially with chronic conditions. So with diabetes or something like that, sometimes patients just want to have greater control over their lives. Like they don't want to take insulin as much. They want their habits have to change. So sometimes what we have to do is recognize that doctors want to help give them their patients control. If you can map out both of those motivations, then you can get, those behavioral changes you're looking for.
But with the bigger systems, I have a couple of teaching hospitals in this area, um, neurology, orthopedics, and they on a mission. They running a lot. They got their infusions, their diagnostics, they got their cannabis going, they got clinics here and there. They bringing in AI. How do they keep their adoption rate high and not have a failure?
Yeah.
How do they bring this behavioral science in? Or what would you recommend in that arena? Anything else that you see that would be helpful? Or is it really similar, like just like a corporation? Is it still pretty much the same? But I see healthcare a little bit different for some reason. They can be.
Yeah. I think the same components of the model still matter. I think where I'd place focus maybe more if you're so busy, and we know health. I mean, they have so many
Yeah.
things. There's compliance issues and there's all sorts of things. I think I would focus on the last part of my model, which is what we call it's called biases or cognitive heuristics is what they are. But we have these biases. How do we help people make fast, easy decisions? So in a world where you're just running, you're gunning every day, and you get in at 8 o'clock, and then you are seeing patients or you're working with paperwork for the entire day, and you may get a half-hour break on your best day. All the motivations and the goal stuff are okay, but really what you may want to do is focus on these biases. So one of them is called authority. And so what we find is that people will take the actions of others who they see that are in a position of authority. So that is something where if you need to get behavioral change happening in your organization, you need them to adopt a technology or adopt a new system.
Technology or compliance or governance, AI governance, responsible AI.
Yeah.
And there's a
Yep.
concern about it, but they're scared of it, and there's a nervousness about it.
Yep. You
It
got to make
seems like
those
this is a
decisions
fit. It
fast.
seems like this is a fit for getting them to move forward or get more comfortable. Maybe that's what it is. Getting them comfortable.
Yeah, and make it feel intuitive. Like I think when we make all these decisions, those decisions, like in your words, are more comfortable, or in my worlds, they have cognitive fit, right? They just feel natural. Those are the decisions when it's so complex that you move forward with. So making things
Cognitive
simple
fit.
and they feel natural is it brings down their stress, and they will almost always go towards the path of least resistance, almost always. And that's where I think that comes in.
So how do people reach out to you? Who's your customer? Who do you want to talk to?
All right. So my customer typically is either a market research professional or a brand manager. And what they're trying to do is understand their customers to better communicate to them. So we could talk internally and externally. Most of my work is done external, from a business to a consumer or business to business. So if you want to find me, you can go to mindstategroup.com and you can learn all about the model itself and our technologies that we use to identify these psychological mind states. Or I do a lot of writing on LinkedIn. So if you go to look me up, Will Leach, on LinkedIn, you'll see a big copy of my book, Marketing to Mind States, on my profile. And I do a lot of writing there. And you can just take the same principles that I talk about on LinkedIn. I write every week on LinkedIn articles and Forbes and a couple other places. You could take those and you could apply those to almost any organization. Because what I like to tell my students is that I'm giving you a human behavioral model that I apply to marketing. But Donna, you can apply those same things to organizational change, to management. I could have written a book called Managing to Mind States, Selling to Mind States, Parenting to Mind States, Marriage by Mind States. It's just really understanding what makes people tick, if you will, and then applying it to your situation. So LinkedIn is a great situation, or go to mindstategroup.com.
All right, then. So did we forget anything that you want to share?
I think we're good. This is great.
I think this is great. I'd like to have you back. I haven't had any conversation about this, and it's a natural fit. So for those that are listening, I hope you enjoyed Will Leach. And this is Donna Mitchell with Pivoting to Technology Adoption, and we're shaping tomorrow together. Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening to Pivoting to Technology Adoption. If this episode gave you something to think about, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a colleague who needs to hear it. My new book, Pivoting to Technology Adoption, Mind the Gap, is available now on Amazon. Visit pivotingportal.com to work with me directly. I'm Donna P. Mitchell, the Transformation Authority. Until next time, mind the gap.